we're learning the Maimer, the Atem Nitzavim Mayoim. We're on in the Chassidus Moveris volume that we're using, Moyadim, volume 1. It's page Samach Gimel 63, and it's Perek Shishi. So here we have the idea that we've been learning. About the Pnimius. The whole Maimer is focusing on one thing, that we have to reach our Pnimius in order to reach HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Pnimius. And that's the whole idea of the Melech, and we discussed it yesterday. Hashem is beyond being just a king and things like that. Let's get to the Maimer now. V'zeu v'shekel b'peles horim v'gvoyis b'moznayim. This is a pasuk in Yeshaya. This has to do with the mountains and the high places are like on a scale, various types of scales. That's what the verse says. It says the Avaraba, this is the meaning. Kihine horim v'gvois, mountains and tall places, hem pchinas u'madregas the ava. This refers to various experience of love for Hashem. Now, you know, Chavre, that in Tanya, from chapter 43 through chapter 50, the Avaraba mentions about 5 to 7 different levels and experiences of love for God. One is called the love of Kihu Chayecha. I love Hashem, Moshe, because He's my life. He gives me life. So just as physically, if someone gives you life, you love that person or you love that object. I was given, Baruch Hashem, healthier life when I started to use my CPAP machine. Hopefully one day I won't need to use it. But before I used my CPAP machine, I was drooling, miserable, stomach pains, headaches, falling asleep at the wheel. It was a real balagan. The morning after I started to use the machine, everything went away. I literally felt Tchias HaMesim. And I became an advocate for the CPAP machine. I don't know if I told you this, but I also believe that it helped people during the hard time of COVID survive, myself included. In fact, when Hatzalah took people to the hospital, I heard the first thing they did, they put up either oxygen or a CPAP machine. So it mamish improved the quality of my life and the quality of many, many other people. So
including me,
including you, it's a lifesaver. It's a lifesaver, yeah. and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's mamish. A lifesaver. I'm usually never tired. If I'm tired, I'm tired because I didn't sleep much, and I'm alert. I'm more alert than people who are half my size and, don't have those issues and they fall asleep and I don't. And it's all because the oxygen, it's flowing, it's flowing and it helps. Just parenthetically, sometimes when you hear someone who passes away in their sleep, it could quite well be from sleep apnea. If the person doesn't have any other issues, and you wonder, man, it could be anyway. So, what type of love do you have for Hashem when you have that experience? Kihu Chayecha. He gave you life. He improved the quality of your life, and that's a fine love. But yet, it's a love that has a condition, a reason, right? Yesterday I called it a relationship of convenience. What's the convenience? You want to sleep better at night. You want to wake up fresh. You don't want to have headaches. You want to be gesund. And it's important. But there is a reason associated with that love that I have for God. Then the Avaraba in those chapters 43 through 50 speaks about Ava Kamayim, Ava Ke'esh, a fiery love, a watery love, different levels. The point why am I mentioning all this? Because we've all learned it in Tanya many times, And it's a very hard part of Tanya. Those 43 to 50 is because, until those chapters, you could understand somewhat the Tanya, because, talks about the psychology of person and depression and happiness and ego and Ahavas Yisrael. But when you start talking about feelings of love towards Hashem, it's like, come on, to have any kind of real palpable love for Hashem is a difficulty. It's not, it's not just saying I love you, God, but it's living that way. And like we discussed, you gravitate to Hashem like you gravitate to food and to the bed when you sleep. That's you have to be more refined for that, and it could be reached. The Alter Rebbe would not put it in Tanya if it was beyond our capability. But nevertheless, Avi, it's an avodah. The Alter Rebbe here says, when the verse in Yeshaya says there are mountains, harim, ugvaot, and exalted tall places, this refers to, in addition to in its literal sense, it also refers to certain aspects of our being that are identified with Ava, with love. Let's see what he says. He says, Gevohos, the Gevohos, heim b'madregoson lemata m'pchinas horim. If you compare Horim, Moshe, mountains, to Gevohos, Gevohos is not as tall, I guess, as Horim. Ki Gevohos einon imah. Hold on. No, is that a mistake here? Hold on. Imon shemekabla min ha'morim. 1 second. Okay, I want you to look at the note for a second in the Chizz Muveres, the bottom right-hand column. After the bold, it says, Inyanu. Yadua Maimer Razal. It's known as teaching of Razal. The Horem Elu Ha'avos. Horem refers to the patriarchs. The Gavois Elu Ha'imois. And Gavois refers to the mothers, the matriarchs. The Kamoisha Imois say Mepchinas Mekabel Min Ha'avos. Just as the matriarchs received from the patriarchs, Kach Pinas Gavois Ilamata Mimadreges Horim. Gevoos are below in level, in experience, than Horim. V'harem is b'avodas Hashem. What does this allude to in service of Hashem? Gevoos he avas Hashem shebechitzonius halev shenodi yizbonim b'dos Hashem. The feeling of love that's developed by us through rational reasoning is encapsulated in the concept of Gevoos. The mothers. It's a feeling. But the mother receives from the father. So there is the essential bond between a Jew and Hashem that's analogous and represented by Avos, the patriarchs. And there is the relationship as it's represented by Imos, the mothers. So that, look now back in the text. Please look at the third line, the middle of the line, where the fourth word, ki. Avi, you got it? Ki gevois inun imhen. From the word ima. Take away the long nun, it's the word ima, mother. Gevos, inun is Aramaic. Gevos, they are the mothers. Shemekablim min hahorim, that they receive from the mountains, which are the fathers. This refers to an external type of love, hanilkach, which is formed, created, mitam v'das, from logic, v'izboinus b'gdulas Hashem, and meditation and greatness Hashem. Kirafu, for God is great. In order to make our soul experience this, we need to refine our soul so that the love of God shines within us. You need to draw down the light of the Torah mitzvahs. Why? Kiramach pikudim, for the 248 mitzvahs, hein ramach evorim de malka. They correspond to the 248 limbs of the king. Veheim pchinas evorim hachitzonim, and this we refer to as the external limbs. Torah hi bepchinas evorim apnimim, and Torah is right like food, Moshe, which you digest. We call that top of Samach Daled evorim apnimim, the inner organs. You know, we have the hands and the feet and the nose and the eyes. Those are all evorim chitzonim, external. You can see them. Then there are the kishkis, the colon, the heart. Those are all evorim pnimiyim. So the Alter Rebbe says the evorim pnimiyim, the inner limbs and all that, they refer to the Torah because it's inner. Just like when you digest food, it becomes part of you. It's inner, it's deeper. Whereas the external is compared to the outer limbs. So, v'lochein Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Chazal say the study of Torah is equal to everything else. If a person's finger is hurt or broken, chas v'sholem, or the like, or a person's nose doesn't look so great and all that, you still can live. Believe me, even before plastic surgery. You could live. But if, God forbid, there's a blemish in the heart or in the colon, in one of the inner organs and limbs, we have a real serious problem. Says the Alter Rebbe, the nefesh, the soul, totally, we're on the second line. It depends, Moshe, its existence depends not on the evorim chitzonim, but on the evorim pnimim, on the inner organs, the inner limbs. Shenikivosam b'mashahu. There is a law, Avi, in the laws of kashrus, treifus. If an animal's insides, kishkis, are punctured, if it's punctured through and through, it becomes invalid, treif. So what do we see? That if there's a puncture to an inner organ or limb, it invalidates the animal. The symbolism being, it causes real damage. So that's why Torah is associated with the inner aspect of man. V'heim kimoshel kaf maznayim, and this is compared in the pasuk to a scale. Sheshoiklin b'kaf zu, we weigh items on this scale. V'noisnim masa b'kaf ashniya lachriya. If you want to know how much is a pound of meat or chicken, whatever, you put it on the scale, and on the other side you put something else to determine the value of the cost of that object that you're buying. So in other words, look, through the load of Torah mitzvahs, machliya kafu ava, it forces kind of the weight of love, l'hoyer al nafshay. Very interesting concept. You have a scale. You put the items and you put something else which weighs heavy, and depending on how much it is, that's how much you know that the weight of the item, the food item that you're purchasing is worth. So the item that you're using to figure out the cost of the food is a masa, it's a load. Says the Alter Rebbe, through the load of Torah mitzvahs. We load ourselves up, Moshe, with Torah mitzvahs. How much Torah do we load ourselves up with? That's the amount of love that will shine from God on your soul. So this answers another question, Hillel, even though you're not on the screen, but you said you're listening. This answers the question, why aren't we more inspired with love of God why doesn't God make it easier for us to love Him and to fear Him and all that? The answer is because the weight that the weight of your Torah mitzvahs, I don't mean you here, but all of us, is not enough. Or it is what it is. And depending on how much weight you put into your Torah mitzvahs, that's the result. So if you study a certain amount of time and a certain quality type of study, you get one result, and you do it otherwise, you get another result. The same as with mitzvahs. That's the point Alter Rebbe is saying here. Next paragraph. So all this Moshe was gevos, the tall places, but not as tall as mountains, which referred, he says, to the mothers, the imahos. Conversely, the level of mountains, they're very, very tall. As we know, Mount Hermon, Mount Miron, etc., etc. This is symbolic of a love that's imbued in a Jew that transcends logic. Why do I love? I don't know why. I love. And we're talking here about a healthy love, not an infatuated, negative love that comes from the negative side, not the positive side. We're talking about loving Hashem in a healthy way, but not based on logic and conditions, but based on, I just love God. Transcending logic. This love for Hashem goes beyond Torah mitzvahs. Torah is derived, comes from wisdom. He connects Yonis in this back to what he said earlier. How can you experience this? Only through tshuva from the depth of the heart. Moshe, Torah is logical. Torah makes sense. If you expect to reach God in a transcending way, using Torah mitzvahs as the medium, you won't. Because Torah mitzvahs only gives you so much reason. Right? And therefore, there are reasons. This person can have an aliyah, this person cannot, according to halacha, have an aliyah. This person deserves this much, and this person deserves this much. On and on and on. Because Torah is halacha confined to reasoning and logic. And so too mitzvahs. Right? You're supposed to hear the Shofar Hashanah, fast Yom Kippur, have a sukkah, and dance with the Torah, Simchas Torah. So the famous story of the Jew who went around collecting money for someone else who was going to be thrown into the dungeons with the big dogs and all that because he couldn't pay his rent to his parrots. Right, so he goes out of Yom Kippur and he collects the money, and the Nebuch people who saw him were laughing at him, and they weren't religious, and they said, if you drink a whole cup of mashke, we'll give you some ruble. And he did it 2-3 times, and he collapsed. He said, take me to shul. He lays in shul, and in the middle, everyone rises for Kol Nidre. He sees everyone getting up. He gets up, and he says, Kumata Reisa, it's time to dance with the Torah. And they want to throw him out because he's drunk and he's out of his mind. It's Yom Kippur, not Simchas Torah. And Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Dichra turns around to him and he says, don't you dare touch him. Get your hands off him. And they're all shocked. But if the Rebbe says, we follow. After Yom Kippur, they asked the Rebbe, could you please tell us what happened here? So he says, sure. There was a heavenly decree against our city, against our people. And I couldn't break it. And when this Jew stood up and he said, Kumato Reisa. Within a minute, instantaneously, he broke the decree because it came me'umka deliba, from the heart. So you see that me'umka deliba, that's tshuva, me'umka deliba. Oh, and then Rabbi Yitzchak said, Moshe, that for this Jew, he went straight from Rosh Hashanah to Simchas Torah. Yes, physically he was in shul, Yom Kippur. But he didn't need the avodah of Yom Kippur. He went straight from Rosh Hashanah all the way to Simchas Torah. So when he said, Kumat Oreisa, he was spot on. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, but wasn't it also because that he managed to win around and he raised the money? and he got the Jew out of jail.
Yes, but he did Moshe, so your question is, so meaning it's like a mitzvah?
No. I'm saying, first he went and was Moser Nefesh, and collected the money, did whatever he needed to do, got drunk, took him up on the proposition, got drunk, managed to get the money, give it to him, and then he said, Bring me the
right. So it's it's the Mesiras Nefesh. Right, so it's the Mesiras Nefesh. That's the point. It's not logical. It's self-sacrifice. He gave away not only his physical, he gave away his spiritual side. Davening like a mensch. Imagine someone says to you, Moshe, I need you to make a minyan in this house, and you're not going to be in shul. You needed the shul, and you're in shul. You want to, and you say, to help another yid, I'm doing it. And then the rabbi, the people say, are you out of your mind? I mean, look, Mesiras Nefesh doesn't have rhyme and reason. It's self-sacrifice. Right, let's continue. And how does he come to this deep feeling coming from the depth of his heart? Because he realizes how distant he is. As we discussed earlier in the Maimer, because you feel distant, therefore a God appears to you, because you're brokenhearted, you're contrite, and you feel remorse, and therefore Hashem's, I love that. Hashem says, I love a broken vessel. I love someone who feels shattered, meaning to say that he feels and realizes that he's distant. And the guy can have his payas and his beard and his yarmulke and his Torah and his chassidus and everything, but inside, he knows that still he's lacking the union, the connection. Hashem says, I love that. This is the idea of a weight, a peles, pirashuhu, hamishkal, shaleitz, oruch. A peles is a type of a scale, type of samachay, that's of wood, long, it's long, v'ritzu es tluyim b'rosham, shekoyrim bezmin. There are two straps, literally. I mean, they're two pulleys. Sheshem sheiklim es adover anitim boy. And over there, on these wooden scales, that's made through these pulleys, you weigh the items that are put there. Va'arichas v'koyvet ho'etz u'merchokoi hu'a machliyoi. And the fact that it's very long and it's made of wood and it's heavy, and because it's like distant from each other, I don't know the physical makeup of this. Maybe you guys have seen such a type of a weight. But whatever it is, this decides what the right weight of the item is. So this is the physical makeup of this type of weight. Why did Alter Rebbe say this? Why did he give us the details of this type of scale? So too, when a person is frustrated, he's bitter about his own soul, that it's distant from Hashem, in an absolute way, and then he decides, I'm going to remove my will from those items that make me feel very distant, from items that he was wedged into and totally immersed. What does he accomplish? He awakens the abundant love that transcends das. So that's the answer, Hillel. In your therapy and in your work, when a person feels very despondent and very far and very lost, to teach them how to take that feeling itself and say, now you are a vessel for real godliness. It's a famous story. Someone went into Yechidus of the Rebbe Rashab, famous story, and needed a bracha. He came out of the Rebbe Rashab and he was sobbing. The Rebbe Rashab's older brother, Razah, Reb Zalman Aaron, saw him. And he asked him, what happened? Didn't you go into my brother for a blessing? He says, yes, but your brother didn't bless me. He didn't want to bless me. So the older brother was by himself. What? He didn't want to give you a bracha for whatever you needed? He said, no. And if that's the case, it shows how distant and far I am, that I'm not worthy of a bracha. So the Razor went into his younger brother, Reb Shalom Ber, and he confronted him, and he said, how you talking? How could you have done such a thing? So the Rebbe Rashab says, send him back in. He sent him back in, and he gave him a bracha. And then later he explained to his brother that he felt when he came in, he wasn't a vessel. He was arrogant, ego, and he wanted a quick fix. Rebbe, give me a blessing and get me out of my stuff. I'll continue being a sinner and a coarse individual, but just give me a blessing. And the Rebbe Rashab said, in order for the blessing, it's like rain. In order for the rain to have an impact on the seeds, you need to plant, and you need to plow. You need to work on yourself, and you need to be brokenhearted. So specifically, I felt that that's what he needed for this individual, and therefore I didn't bless him because I wanted him to cry and break and shatter his ego. And then as soon as he did that and he came back in, I blessed him because he was a vessel. Now, of course, you have to be a tzaddik, and you have to, it's not for us to say, someone comes and asks for help, and we throw them away, and we're nasty and all that. That's not appropriate. But the idea is a true concept. So the Alter Rebbe says that over here. The Alter Rebbe says here, Al Yidei Merirus Shebenafshoy Al Richuke Me'eis Hashem. Through this, you experience the Avaraba. So that's the answer. The problem itself is the springboard for the greatest solution. So, but nevertheless, he does say, Akiris Harotzen. Someone did a transgression that's wrong. Don't tell him, hey, go and do it again, and then do tshuva. That's foolishness, and you're not allowed to do that. Echta v'oshuv, the Gemara says, if someone says, I will sin and I will do tshuva, maspikim yodi las tshuva. Hashem doesn't give him an opportunity, even though the Alter Rebbe and Tanya already has a twist on that too. But simply speaking, but we're talking about not such a situation. The fact is that we fell into a hole, and now we're in a dark black hole. How do you get out of a dark black hole? So one answer is to try to find light and to illuminate the situation, and that is generally the advice. But if you and based on that, Moshe, the relationship is conditional. It's a relationship. It's a love, Hillel, but it's a conditional one. If you want a love that is limitless, that's bligvul, that breaks all barriers, for that you need to come from the merirut. The merirut is the best vessel for growth. Let's continue. V'zehu, page Samachay, second paragraph. V'zehu horim hagvoyim layalim. There's another verse, Tehillim Kuf Dalet. The verse says, I think Ya'al is a steinbock, I believe. It's a type of an animal. The type of deer, I think, that have these, I forget. They have another name. It's not called a deer. It's called something else. Anyone know what it's called? A Ya'al?
A gazelle?
Yeah, gazelle. I think so. So the pasuk says, thank you. The pasuk says, Horim Hagvoim, the tall mountains, La Ya'alim, for the gazelles, Pirush. Shebchinas Horim Hagvoim Nimshech Lamata Al Yidei Yalim. The way we have access, Hillel, to those tall mountains spiritually? Through the gazelle. Shehu Bchinas Koil HaShofar, right? Because you cut the horns of the gazelles, and you blow shofar out of that. Ki shofar is a shona shel yal poshut. The Mishnah says that the best type of shofar is a yal poshut, a simple, unwinded horn from a gazelle. And that's what you use for blowing the shofar. Shehu Pchinas Tshuva Meimik Alev Canal. This is the idea of doing tshuva from the very depth. V'loshin Yal Hu Loshin Aliyah. The term Yal also isn't only a gazelle, but it also associated with another Hebrew word, Aliyah, to elevate. Shemayles Adam L'Pchinas U'Madregas Ava Shelamayla Min Hadas U'Poshut. This type of Ava elevates a person to a higher plateau, and uposhut, right? The Mishnah says, Moshe, you have certain windy type of horns. Then you have a simple horn. It's very straightforward. We call that poshut. The chol mada poshut libeit fei odif. The more straight the horn is, the better it is. It's one of my most famous sayings that I love. Kol the poshet fei odif. The more simple you are, the better you are. The sophistication leads to complication. We know in life, you understand, those people that are sophisticated and thinkers and this and that, they have many issues, okay? People who are simple in character, simple in nature, simple in attitude, are the best. Just like a simple horn, not windy and not gedreit, is better. The hainu livsheit es ha'ava mislapshus beguf. In order to extract the love for Hashem by not being invested in the body, by one screaming inside himself, is limse nafshel Hashem, to have the Mesiras Nefesh. Moshe, which you spoke about before, that the Yid who went around Erev Yom Kippur, that was Mesiras Nefesh. Uliskolo be'echad, and therefore he just wants to be with everyone, right? What does he do, Moshe? Listen to this. He lays down a shul. You know why? He wants to be with everyone in shul. He's not going to daven. He's not going to stand, rise, sit, left, right, page this, after raise up, He don't need any of that. He just wants to be in shul. Leave me alone. Let me just be in shul with Jews. Liskala bi'echad. V'zeu v'kasha nishba lavasecha. This is the meaning of the verse, as I promised your ancestors. L'Avram v'Yitzchok u'Yaakov shehem pchinas horim v'agvois. They refer to the horim hagvoim, the tall mountains. Ki be'ever, next page, Samach Vav. Ki be'ever ayar yoshvu avesechem. It says on the other side of the river, your ancestors sat, dwelled, lived. When we talk about the river, it's the river that comes from where? From Eden. Lahashka says agan, from to water to irrigate what the garden. Umisham yipored, and the Torah says, and from there we have different rivers. What does that mean spiritually? This means that there's a godliness that is drawn and comes liyos sham hasogas hanevroyim. In other words, the godliness that comes to irrigate the river, and from there it divides into 4 different rivers, is analogous to simple and plain forth godliness being drawn to the creatures throughout the world that Hashem makes, and everyone perceives them in a different way. So where does it come from, Hillel? Me'ever anar, from the other side of the river, which is Lamayla Min Hadas. It comes from transcendence into rationality. And again, he says, what is this level? How is this level symbolized? Through the concept of tall mountains. So Moshe, tall mountains refers to Ava L'mayla Mitam V'das. It's a love for a God that transcends logic and rationale. Shamu sheirish b'chinas u'madregas ha'avos. There is the source of the ancestors, of the patriarchs. Sham hoisa shvua. So that's why it says, look at the pasuk. The pasuk says before, v'kasher nishba lavosecha, like I swore to your ancestors, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, me'ever hanar. Right? Literally, Yonason. When we say that, it's a location issue. Where did God make the covenant, the agreement with Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov on the other side of the Nar? Says the Alter Rebbe, that's true physically in its location, but spiritually means that the oath and promise that God made for Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that we, the Jews, will be His people and all that, it comes from a very deep place in God, the deepest place called Me'ever Ayar, from the other side of the ocean, of the river, meaning from transcendence, not from logic. Because logic, Moshe, we would say, well, if you didn't do what you have to, you're not doing right. You're not my people. Go to someone else. The employee doesn't do what the employer wants. He loses his job. So we say, no, Me'ever Ayar Anar. We go back with you, God, Me'ever Anar. L'mayla mitam v'das, transcending logic and reasoning. And from there, it extends itself to logic and reasoning. And he concludes, Umisham hoisa shvua. So that's where the oath that God made with us comes from. V'akrisis Bliss and the pact. That God says, I will be your God, in a pneumistic way. So the Alter Rebbe, at the end, here ends the Mimer, the Alter Rebbe ties it all together, and he says, and you're going to see this when you say the Psukim of Zichroinus and the Malchios. It talks about this. These are all Psukim, by the way, in Malchios, Zichroinus, and Shofar. So when you say those, and I hope you'll think about it this year, you're going to come across some of these Psukim. And if you know this mimer, and it's not an easy mimer, you need to review it. Shabbos is a good day because it's a break between now and Rosh Hashanah. So really, if you can relearn this with someone or yourself, or the Chassidus of Eretz, because there's a lot of explanation here that's there to help you understand it better. But this is the idea that the Krisis Bliss, we're coronating Hashem as our Melech, or we're asking Him to be in our life, B'pnimius. This all is expressive of the Aver Anar relationship, the transcendent relationship. Hevra,
beautiful.
It's time to...
Beautiful.
Yes. It's time to say to each other, today or tomorrow, I forget, is Reb Shmuel's Stroll's father's yahrzeit. If you see him, wish him l'chaim. His father's neshama shav and aliyah, and the ikir is that everyone should have taka ksiv v'chsimatei be written and inscribed for a year.
Thank you so much for such a great year of learning Chassidus.
Baruch Hashem, and I benefit more than you. You don't know, but I do. I'm serious. Not only that I get up early, which I love, but to learn Chassidus in the morning, I just wish I would be able to do it before davening and not davening this minyan. I daven so fast. I couldn't make the Shmoneh Esrei today with them. They daven so fast. Anyway, the point is, it's all good, right? The point is that it's time. It's time that we need Mashiach, and a part of, by the way, of the Shofars in the Psukim is a lot about Mashiach. You'll take a look. The great Shofar, the Kaaba Shofar Gadol that will blow when Mashiach comes. So Hillel, you're blowing a Shofar this morning. Your father's beautiful Shofar that he got as a bar mitzvah gift is part of that experience. When Mashiach will come, you'll blow that Shofar. And your father will be standing there next to you, and he'll blow the Shofar, and we'll all blow the Shofar. And it's not, it's serious. I mean to say, it's real. It can happen like this. Look, the Eibishter sent us this COVID like this. He could take it away like this, and He will take it away. And Mashiach will come like this. When Hashem wants something to happen, it's coming, like we learned in the Maimer, it's transcendence. It doesn't have rules and regulations. You have to do this, and you have to do that. You have to do this. No. You have to come Oimek Alev. And I think this is an important message to the youth, even those that don't see such a great interest in coming to shul and in davening and all that. Say, listen, just come in and just sit in the shul. And not for 6 hours. Come in on the Rosh Hashanah for 5 minutes and just close your eyes, breathe in and breathe out, and think about whatever. If we can get more people to do that, trust me, everyone will be happier. You know what I'm saying? Because after all, every Yid wants to do what Hashem wants. It's just the hardships of life in so many different ways get in the way and cause chaos and cause issues and relationships with parents and rebellion. My father is this, my mother is that, my cat is this, and my dog is this, and everyone is the same, and it's a big hodgepodge. And now in California, they want in the department stores not to display not the males and females, but gender. I mean, the world is getting so sick. It is nuts. And they're going to have legislation. They're going to vote that you have to have displays that will, Rahman Litzlan, remove the male and the female because you don't know anymore who's what. So it's what's the expression? It's crazy and getting more crazy. But what's the Nekuda? The Nekuda is, even though that's the situation, but that's the Rebbe saw in all of this a sign that Mashiach is closer and closer and closer. It's the same thing we learned in the Maimer. I really want to say this. The Maimer we learned that when you're distant, it's the greatest way to reconnect and the best way and the deepest way. You'll get the deepest connection through the failure and disappointment and the brokenheartedness. Logically, it's not that way, Comes the Alter Rebbe and he turns it around 180 degrees. And the Rebbe did the same thing. The Rebbe came from Russia. He was besides family royalty, he was a Yid from a different world and a different time. Comes to America, he sees a broken world after the Holocaust. And he sees that the assimilation is just getting worse and worse. The Rebbe saw in 1950 what people didn't see till 1990. That assimilation is rampant and it's just going to get worse and worse. And it did. And he says we have to open up the Chabad houses and send people out and get away. I don't want you to be next to me. I want you to be in Chicago and in Pittsburgh and in Africa. Go there. You want to be a real Chabadnik, a real Chassid? Go there. If you go there, you're more of a Chabadnik than standing next to me and looking at me and participating in the Farbrengens, because Jews need you. Nobody else at the time. No one had this vision in this global way. And Baruch Hashem, he said it's not a copyright, so people joined, and we have such a powerful Baltruva movement, and in a way, we discussed it, like in a way the Baltruva movement is finished, ended. It's in other words, the high time of the Baltruva movement was the 70s and the 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Now, as we discussed, it's a whole different type. So the real heyday of the Baltruva, and that too I understand, because, it was coming, the 50s, 60s, the Vietnam War and the hippie culture and everything. It lent itself. It was right up the alley of the Baltruva movement. So now it's a different experience. And the Rebbe saw that, and he sent out his chevra, and right away, and like I told you, don't think they were running, the parents, because they were from Russia and from Poland. They just went through Stalin. They went through Holocaust. Comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, no rest, move out. And they weren't cooperating, the 50s. The Rebbe had a very big battle, and that's why those few that did go, and there was the Bacher in the yeshiva, he lauded them. He spoke about them. And because they broke through in a way, they went against their own parents. What we say in Pirkei Avos, Ki Avi ve'imi azavuni, I forsake my father and my mother, v'Hashem yasmeini, and God gathers me. So the hippie culture, the counterculture in the 60s said, forget about establishment, no father, no mother, I do what I want, right? But it led to, everything that it led to. The David HaMelech says, forget about your father and mother, forsake them, but Hashem yasfuni. Find God. Go to Hashem. Go to Torah. Go to mitzvahs. Go to connect the right way with Hashem. So David HaMelech, in a sense, saw rebellion as a positive step to growth, but channeled it. It's like Reb Shlomo, right? I tell over that story that I heard. I think I wrote it in the book. You know, it's 1969. It's the march. What's it called in San Francisco to the ocean? You know, everyone's going down to let themselves loose at the San Francisco Bay. Thousands of people are walking. I think August of 69 or July, August, and Reb Shlomo is walking with the Chevra from the House of Love and Prayer. He's walking along with them, but he makes a left turn and he doesn't continue down to the bay. And he takes them to somewhere else, and he brings with them and teaches them. Because he knew at the bay they're doing, very inappropriate things, and it's not godly and holy. You understand? So there's the rebellion. The rebellion is good. But how you channel the rebellion, what you do with the rebellion, that takes leadership, that takes rabbonim, and that takes us as parents and grandparents in a community and with families to give direction, albeit with respect, but to give direction. Okay, enough for the Farbrengen. Chevra, we'll see you, Mr. Shem, after the Ksivach Simateva, and we'll talk more and learn more.
Next year.
Yeah, so the next year, as it stands now, Hillel, is Monday before Yom Kippur. Okay?
Very good.
Sei gesund. Good Ben Shir. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
See you next. We'll see you next.
See you next year. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.